This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. So we're learning Sefer Zecharia, Parakeh, and we just learned about the prophecy of the woman in the cauldron. The woman in the cauldron. What happened? The Malach says to Zecharia, lift up your eyes and see what's coming out. What is it? Zecharia said, I don't know what it is. And he said, this is the measurement cup that comes out. And a talent of lead is floating. And there's a woman sitting in the cauldron, in the pot. And the Malach explained, this woman represents wickedness. And he threw her into the pot. And he threw a lead stone onto her mouth. What is this talking about? So we learned various explanations, and I just want to review very quickly the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Daled Amud Beis, and it's also a Gemara in Yuma Samach Tes Amud Beis. Okay, and the Gemara learns that this is a reference to the period in history where the Yetzirah for Avodah Zarah was very powerful, and the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah prayed to abolish the Yetzirah for Avodah Zarah. And this woman, we explained, is a reference to Avodah Zarah. Why is Avodah Zarah a reference to a woman? Because we explained that the underlying motivation for serving Avodah Zarah is zunos, is licentiousness. Okay, so the Gemara says, "Vayizaku b'kol gadol Hashem kayam." They cried out to God in a loud voice. Says the Gemara, "My Amor." What did they say? Amar Rabbi Yehuda v'Yitem Rabbi Yonasan. Bai. Whoa. Hainu da'achrave lebeisa. This is what destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. V'kalya lehechla, and burnt the sanctuary. V'katlinu letzadike, and killed all the tzadikim. V'aglinu li'yisomei arayu, and made Klal Yisrael be exiled from their land. V'adayin hu meraked beinan, and it's still prancing among us. Klum yahavite lan. The only reason you gave it to us, ela lekbule be'igra, is only to receive reward. Lo iu ba'inan v'la igra ba'inan. We don't want it, and we don't want the reward. Okay? In other words, the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah are davening to abolish what? Avodah Zarah. Basar da'aviku bei. Once they grabbed it, yasu tzlasu yoma b'tanisa, they fasted 3 days. Bo rachame, they prayed for mercy. Nafalahu piska merakia. A document came down, a piece of paper came down from Shemayim, to have a ksivba MS. It said on the document the word MS, Amar Rav Chanina, Shma Mina, Chaysamay Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, MS. What happened? Nafak Higuria Denura Mibeis Kadshe HaKadoshim. A fiery lion cub emanated from the Kadesh HaKadoshim. Amar Lahu Navi Yisrael, the Navi says to Klal Yisrael, Hainu Yitzra da Avodah Zarah. This is the Yetzirah of Avodah Zarah. Why is the Yetzirah for Avodah Zarah being compared to a lion cub? The answer is because it's very powerful. Like the Gemara said, that one of the Amoram thought the Yetzirah for Avodah Zarah, he wasn't impressed. He didn't realize how strong of a temptation it was. And Menashe came, look, if you were around in my time and I was running after Avodah Zarah, you'd be holding up my coattails, following me to Avodah Zarah. So that's why it's being compared to a lion cub.
Lion cub and not the lion itself.
A young cub, strong cub. Strong.
The cub was cute, like a kitten, but it gets strong and kill you.
Oh, see, the Yetzirah is also cute. But you're
No.
not careful, it can rip you apart.
Depends what kind of Yetzirah. So now that's what it's a reference to the Yetzirah of Avodah Zarah. That's what the Aruch LaNer says at the end of Makos. The Marsha in Masechta Yuma says, Anaf Samach Tes Amud Beis, that the celestial sign of the month of Av is Arius, is lion, and it's a reference to the fact that the Beis HaMikdash was burnt down because in the month of Av. And not only the first time, but the second time as well. Even though the second time it wasn't because of Avodah Zarah, it was also. In other words, it was revisited. Okay. But that's, we learned this last time, I just want you to see it inside. And then the Gemara says, Amr Hu Navli Yisrael, Hani Avodah Zarah, Bahadi de Kataf Silei, as they were grabbing it, Ishtamet Benisa Minei, a hair flew out. Va'azal kali ba'arba mea parsi, the sound of the lion emanated 400 parsa. Amru, they said, Heichi niyavid, what should we do? Dilma mishamaya merachmei alei. Maybe Hashem will have mercy on this lion because it cried out. By the way, while they were trying to snatch it, a hair flew out. When the Gemara in Sukkah says that to the Rishayim, Hashem's going to show them the Yetzirah and it's going to look like a hair, this is the hair that came out of the lion cub. Okay, so the plan was, Amalei Navi, Shajuhu beduda de'ivra, put it in a lead pot, v'chesiua be'ivra, and cover it in lead, the shayif kale, it will absorb the sound. The chsiv, like the pasuk says, in which sefer? Zecharia, chapter 5, verse 8. Vayomer zois harisha, this is the wickedness. Vayashlech oisel toicha efa, they threw her into the measuring pot, vayashlech esel even oiferes el pia, and they threw the stone lead into its mouth. And then the Gemara says, while they're at it, they wanted to abolish the temptation for arayos, and the world did not function too well. Okay.
Yeah, Gematria 95.
Yeah. So Rabbi say, here's the question. This we learned last week. Let's say, here's the issue. Avodah Zarah was rampant during Bayis Rishon. There were great people alive during the Bayis Rishon. You had David HaMelech, you had Shlomo, you had Chizkiyahu, you had Yirmiyahu, you had Yeshaya. Why didn't any of them daven to abolish the temptation for Avodah Zarah? It's only Ezra's time, the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. Now they're davening to abolish Avodah Zarah. A little bit too late. Sorry, you missed the boat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akrelnu mivarei.
Right.
Why now? Why now? They were greater. Was Ezra greater than David? No. So this is a very important question. Another issue is, we know that the sanctification of Ezra, when he sanctified the second Beis HaMikdash, was actually more effective than when they sanctified the first Beis HaMikdash. The first Beis HaMikdash is Kedusha, Kitcha Rishayna, Kitcha L'Shaita, V'loi Kitcha L'Asid Lavai. It was only temporary. The Kedusha, the second Beis HaMikdash, was Kitcha L'Shaita, V'Kitcha L'Asid Lavai. And we actually learn it out from a drasha, V'Heitivacha, V'Hirba Me'avaisecha, that Yeshua ben Nun needed 14 years of kibush and chiluk. Ezra just merely walked in and he sanctified the land. How could that be? Yeshua was greater than Ezra. Yeshaya was greater than Ezra. Yirmiyah was greater than Ezra. Why only during Bayis Sheni did they have this capacity and not during Bayis Rishon? So this brings us to a general issue, and that is the concept how throughout Shas you find so many times the Amoraim change nature at will. Miracles at, say, Moshe Rabbeinu. It wasn't so easy for him to split the Yam Suf. He had to daven, he had to lift up his stick, he had to, Klal Yisrael, Nachshon ben Aminadav had to jump in, and they had to see the Arona Shel Yosef, and then finally the Yam split. And Pinchas ben Yair, every time he got anywhere near water, it split. And then when he got to the other side and he realized his donkey is on the backside, so he said, split for my donkey. So 1 second. The water splits easier for the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair than it splits for Moshe Rabbeinu and 600,000 Jews? The Gemara says, look how great Pinchas ben Yair was. He could have done, his donkey could do what it was difficult for Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is not just the only example. Throughout the Gemara, we find, let's say, in Masechta Tainis by Rabbi Yitzchak ben Al-Yashiv, where someone came to him, he said, Rabbi, my brother-in-laws, they're very arrogant, they're very overbearing, I can't take them anymore. So Rabbi Yitzchak ben Al-Yashiv says, okay, let them become poor. And they became poor. And then he came back the next day. Now that they're poor, they're collecting tzedakah from me. I can't take it anymore. So he said, let them be rich again. And then a guy comes to Rabbi Yitzchak ben Al-Yashiv, and he says, Rabbi Yitzchak, my wife, when we got married 40 years ago, she looked good, but it's not the same anymore. She's not as beautiful as, when we got married. So he said, what's your name? What's her name? Chana. Chana Tesyapi. Let Chana become beautiful. And sure enough, he came home, like a kala meidala. And then he said, he comes running back to the Rebbe, yeah, but now that my wife's beautiful again, the credit card bills are out of control. She doesn't want to stop by. Right? It's like the guy who, his credit card was stolen, and he didn't report it. Because the Ganav wasn't using it as much as his wife did. Right? So, and it's just a joke. It's not a true story. Yeah? So he said, I can't take anymore. Now that my wife is beautiful, the expenses are too much. So he said, okay, she should be regular again. Right? So you see that the Amoram, like that, they could just change nature. Do you find anywhere in the Torah where Avram Avinu couldn't have a kid? Why didn't he just say, Sarah should turn young again? It wasn't so easy. It required a lot of tefillah. Tchias HaMesim. We know that any Amora in the Gemara could be Mechayim Mesim. And they did. There are constant instances of people dying and the Amoram bringing them back to life. And yet, in the whole Tanakh, in the whole Chumash, not one person is brought back to life. The whole Chumash! Never do we find Moshe Rabbeinu ever bringing anyone back to life. Nowhere do we find Yoshua ben Nun bringing anyone back to life. You find it by Eliyahu and you find it by Elisha a total of 4 times. But in the Gemara, constant theme. They're bringing people back to life. So, just in a nutshell, the explanation is given by the grandfather of Rabbi Yashiv, the Leshem. The Leshem wrote, the grandfather of Rabbi Yashiv, Rav Shlomo El Yashiv, he wrote a sefer called Leshem Shavaya Ve'achlama, which are Sifrei Kabbalah, but he has a famous piece where he explains this phenomenon of why throughout Shas we find that the Amoram were able to make so many miracles, like just, it was at their discretion. And even though there are some miracles in the Tanakh, it seemed to have been more difficult. And his basic premise is that the world is governed by the Torah. And the more access you have to the Torah, the more control you have over nature. And not just any Torah, but specifically the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And for whatever reason, Kach Ola B'Machshavtai, it was God's will that in the times of the Amoraim, that was the greatest proliferation of Torah Sheba'al Peh in the history of the Jewish people. More even than at Har Sinai, because at Har Sinai, you had the Torah Shebachsav, you had the halachas of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, but all the various Yud Gimel Midah Shatar Nidreshes Behem were not fully employed yet until the times of the Shas. And when the Rebbe Shem saw fit that the Torah Sheba'al Peh should be given to this world and come down to this world, along with the giving over the Torah Sheba'al Peh, came the control of the universe. So yes, Pinchas ben Yair was able to do what even Klal Yisrael couldn't do as they came out of Mitzrayim. And the Amoram were able to do even what Eliyahu and Elisha could not do. And this began in the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. And that's why Ezra's Kibush of Eretz Yisrael was more effective even than Yoshua ben Nun. Because in times of Ezra already, the gates of the Torah Sheba'al Peh began to open. And Chazal started making many takanos and gezeros, and they started to expand the oral law. And that is why it was only at this time where the Chachamim saw how much power they were being given. Herhivu nafsham, they mustered up the guts to ask the Ribono Shel Olam, while we're at it, while you're giving us the keys of nature and you're giving us the keys of Tchias HaMesim, and we could change the world at will, you know what? Please abolish the Zecharia for Avodah Zarah. But until that time, they never would have gechalamt that they would have the power to daven for such a thing. Okay. Now, we could add that it could be also in the 15th century, in the 16th century, when there was another giving of Torah to Klal Yisrael, and that was the giving of the Kabbalah, times of the Arizal and his Talmidim, the Moshe Cordovero and Reb Chaim Vital and the Alshech and so forth. That was another period of time where we find tremendous nisim, that these individuals were able really to be meshana the teva. Also, it could be because there was a certain revelation of Torah Sheba'al Peh that had not been revealed until that time, and therefore they too were given these keys. Okay, so that explains the this nevuah of Zecharia. Okay, let's see the next nevuah. The next nevuah is not the woman in the pot, but it's the flying woman. Okay, let's see Zecharia Perek Hey Pasuk Tes. I lifted my eyes. Va'era, and I saw. V'hinei shtayim nashim. There are two ladies. Yotzais coming out. V'ruach b'chanfeihem, with wind at their wings. V'lahena chinafayim, and these had wings. Kechanfei hachasida, like the wings of a chasida. What is a chasida?
Swan, isn't it? Swan.
Right, a stork. They had wings like the wings of a stork. Vatisena es ha'efa, and they lifted up the measuring cup, bein haaretz, between the earth, and bein hashamayim, and the heaven. Now these women were coming out of the Holy of Holies. According to Rashi, Rashi says they were coming out of the Bayis, the Beis HaMikdash. But the Metzudas David says that they were coming from the Shamayim. Now, who are these two ladies, and who do they represent? Says Rashi. Rashi says these are referred to the two nations that ruled simultaneously, Bavel and the Kasdim. Bavel and Kasdi. Right? Remember we learned that Lamnatseach al Hashminis, that even though there are four Galios, each Galus had a counterpart. Bavel had Kasdi, Madai had Paras, Yavan had well, we're going to actually see soon in Zecharia who the counterpart of Yavan was, and then Mokdon, right, thank you. And Esav and Yishmael. Okay, so who are these two ladies? According to Rashi, these were the two Golusim of Bavel and the Kasdi. The Marikara says, who do they represent? Marikara says they represent the Aser Hashvatim and Yehuda and Binyamin. However, the Radak learns that the two nations, the two women represent one Yehuda and one Binyamin. Why are they separate? Because the Aser Hashvatim were already exiled. So, either this represents the ones who were exiling us, Bavel and Kasdi, or it represents the nations that were being exiled.
Well, here in the Sansino, we quote Sanhedrin
Chaf
Daled Bays, where one represents hypocrisy and one represents pride. Together with vicious, establish themselves in Bavel.
Okay, good. So we're going to see that. We have that in the Gemara on the sheet. That's Marmakum number 2. But this is the way the Mefarshim learned. It either refers to the ones who are exiling or those who are exiled, and they were holding this vessel between the heavens and the earth. Now, what is the representation? What is the symbolism of the fact that they were floating? Not like the first woman. The first woman was sunk in the earth and will remain there forever. But this one is floating in the air. In other words, they have opportunity to return. In other words, the first wave of exiles, which is the Aser Hashvatim, they ain't coming back. But the second wave of Yehuda and Binyamin, they did return at the end of the 70 years. Okay. I said to the Malach who spoke to me, where are they taking this measuring vessel? He said to me, is to build a house, Eretz Shinar, in the land of Shinar. It will be established, and will be left there al mechunasa, on its base. In other words, these women were going to Bavel. They were going to build houses there. What is the representation of this? That the Galus Bavel, the Galus of Yehuda who went to Bavel, they will be able to settle there and build homes until the time that they will be able to come back. So let's see Rashi. Rashi says, Al Mechunasa, Al Kviyusa, on its establishment, the Al Basisa, Kan Ramazlai. Here it's being alluded to them, Sheba Avoinum Shal Yisrael, that for the sin of Klal Yisrael, Shemadadu, Besaas Averos, Virasha, because they measured out a certain measure of Averos and wickedness, Laku Ba'osamida, they were smitten with that measurement, Uvo Shtei Umais, and two nations came, Shamalchu Ka'achas, that ruled simultaneously, Heim Bavel V'Kazdi, and what is that appointed time? 70 years. However, the Radak says a somewhat of a frightening pshat. The Radak says that the Jews who went to Bavel, they built houses there. And they became settled there. And they planted there. And when it came time to come back to Eretz Yisrael, they were Nisatzel. And they didn't want to go up. Even after the Beis HaMikdash was built. Why? Because they were very comfortable and they were very established where they had built their homes.
It says here that Bavel, at the time when Yidden left Bavel, was the center of the then heathen world. So they were comfortable maybe with the environment that existed there.
Yeah.
Those that stayed.
Here the emphasis is on the fact that the Jews built homes there and they didn't want to leave their homes that they built. So now that's how the Mefarshim learned this Gemara. I want you to see how the Gemara in Sanhedrin on Daf Chav Daled learns this Nevuah of Zecharia. Ba'esa einai, I lifted my eyes. This is Zecharia Parakeh Pasuk Tes through Yud Aleph. Va'irav hinei shtayim nashim yotzos, two women coming out. V'ruach b'chanfeim, wind in their wings. Ulahena knafayim, and these wings kekanfei hachasida, like the wings of a stork. Vatisena ha'efa, and the measuring cup was lifted bein hashemayim and bein ha'aretz, between the heaven and the earth. I said to the angel that spoke to me, where are they bringing this measuring cup? He said to me, to build a house in the land of Shinar. What does this mean? What are the two women? Zuchanufa v'gasas haruach. This refers to flattery and arrogance, Shiur Bavel, which was descended to Bavel, characteristic of Bavel. The Babylonians were very flattering, and they were also very arrogant. Flattering meaning they flattered. They had that midah of sacrimony. Says Gemara, "B'gasas haruach leBavel nachis." Did arrogance descend to Bavel? Ba'amar mar, but it was taught asara kaven gasas yardu la'olam. 10 measurements of arrogance descended to the world. Tisha not la'i elam. 9 of them Elam took. V'yachas kol elam kulai. So how could you say Bavel is arrogant? The arrogant is in Persia. The Persians are arrogant, not the Babylonians. Elam. Says Gemara, yeah. In LaBavel Nachas. It came down to Bavel, but they took it in Persia. The Persians took it. Right? It migrated, it moved, it extended to Elam. The proof is to build a house in the land of Shinar. And how do we see from there that it migrated?
Shinar is what? Is Bavel or is Persia?
Shinar is Bavel. So how do you see from there that it migrated to Babel, just because it says Livnois La Bayis B'Eretz Shinar. Bayis is Lashon Yachid. Only one house, but all the other homes were built in Persia. Okay. So from here we see that originally these two midas came down to Babel. The only thing is the Persians took one of them. But everybody knows that how do you know if a country is arrogant? The punishment of arrogance is poverty. And in Babel, they were very poor. So if they were poor, that's mashma that the Babylonians were arrogant and not the Persians. A simon to arrogance is poverty, and arrogance came to Babylon. Says the Gemara, Mayanios. What kind of poverty are we talking about? When we say that a simon of arrogance is poverty, it doesn't mean financial poverty. It means aniyas and Torah. In other words, if you see a community that they don't know Torah, it's a sign of arrogance. Say what? How is lack of Torah knowledge a sign of arrogance? The answer is because why wouldn't someone know Torah? Because they don't review what they're learning. Why wouldn't someone review what they're learning? Because they rely on their memory and they rely on their smarts. They figure, I learned it already in second grade, so I don't need to learn this again. I already heard this before.
But in Babel there was a lot of Torah.
No, there was no Torah in Babel. Not in the times of Ezra. This is not in the times of the Gemara. This is in the times of Ezra. And excuse me. So in other words, and there was a lot of poverty in Babel. Excuse me, there was financial poverty in Babel. So Gemara says, no, we're not talking about financial poverty. Excuse me. We're talking about poverty in learning. And in Babel, there was not poverty in learning. In Babel, there was financial poverty. In Persia, there was poverty in learning. Why was there poverty of learning in Elam, in Persia? The answer is because they were Balei Gaiva. And now the Gemara is going to explain it the following way. That when Ezra came to teach Torah in Babel, he was successful. When Mordechai tried to teach Torah in Persia, didn't go. When Daniel tried to teach Torah in Persia, didn't go. Throughout history, whenever the Anshe Knesset tried to teach Torah in Persia, nobody understood. Why? Because their midah was Gaiva.
Didn't we learn?
And not the Goyim. Talking about Daniel and Mordechai were not successful in teaching Torah in Paras. In Elam. Elam is the capital of Persia.
So when we learned that...
But Ezra, when he came to Babel, Ezra was successful. Why? Because in Babel they were poor. So since they were poor, they weren't Balei Gaiva, they understood the Torah. In Persia they were wealthy, and therefore they were spiritually bereft.
So when we learned that at the time of Esther Mordechai, that Bnei Israel accepted Tosha Peh.
Yeah.
So that's referring to Babel and not to Persia?
No. So what does accepting Torah have to do with knowing Torah?
Well, but I mean, up until that point, Bnei Israel didn't accept it.
Nobody accepted it. Nothing to do with Persia. There were Jews all over the world. It doesn't mean that...
Is that a big madrega for them? That
it doesn't. We don't find anywhere that Dafka, the Jews of Shushan or Persia or Makabel Torah...
Is not a mila. They didn't...
all the Jews accepted Torah. Nothing...
Not until that generation did they accept Torah Shabbat Peh.
But what does that have to do with Persia?
No, I'm asking. We just said Mordechai was in Persia.
We don't find Mordechai was Makabel the Torah more than anybody else. All of Klal Yisrael were Makabel the Torah. We don't find that the Persians were Makabel the Torah. It says Hadar Kablua, all of Klal Yisrael. All of Klal Yisrael. So now the Gemara says, what are you talking about? What does it mean that they were not? They didn't have Torah in Persia? Says the Gemara, the pasuk says like this: Achois lanu ketana. V'shadayim einla. We have a sister, she's small. Her shadayim are not developed yet. In other words, a young girl can't nurse yet. Why? Because her system is not developed. Right? That's what the pasuk says in Shir Hashirim. We have a sister, but she doesn't have the ability to nurse. What does this refer to? It refers to Elam. Elam is the capital of Persia. That people learn Torah, but there's no teaching there. Shazach Saloma, they merited to learn, but they did not merit to teach. But in Bavel, they merited to teach. My Bavel, why is it called Bavel? Am Rabbi Yochanan, Belula, B'Mikra, it's mixed with learning Chumash, Belula B'Mishnah, Belula B'Talmud. So according to this Nevuah of Zecharia, Zecharia saw a Nevuah about Bavel's two characteristics. One was flattery, and one was arrogance. And interesting, even though arrogance came down to Bavel, but a different country took it, and that is Paras. So you see from here that when things come down min hashamayim, even if they're designated to a certain place, they could be usurped and taken by other people. They say, in the Rebbe said that during the Baal Tshuva movement, as beautiful as it was that so many people returned to Rebbeinu Shalom, you had a tremendous movement, which unfortunately, some say that window and that opportunity is not as prevalent as it once was. You don't have the same numbers anymore. And everyone said, "Oh, how beautiful it was." The Rebbe says it was a tremendous accusation against us, because a inspiration came down in Hashamayim that Jews could do tshuva, and that the fact that observant Jews and Shomer Torah mitzvahs didn't take that Hisayrus for themselves, and instead they let it go to those who are more distant. In a way, it's an accusation against ourselves. But you see from here, sometimes things come down in Hashamayim. First come, first serve. You have to take advantage of the opportunity. Rabbi, have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.